Imagine you're a parent. Your baby is sick. Nothing serious, just a fever that won't break. A cough that has been going on a little too long. So you do what any good parent does. You bundle them up, you drive to the hospital, and you hand them to the people who are supposed to help. And then you sit in that waiting room, and you wait, and you trust. Because that is what hospitals are for. That is what nurses are for. Now imagine that the person who just walked away with your child, the one in the scrubs, the one who smiled at you, the one who said, "Don't worry, we've got them," was the very reason your child never came home. That is not a hypothetical. That happened in Texas in the 1980s, over and over and over again. And the woman responsible? She didn't run from those babies. She ran toward them. This is Black Women of Crime. Today we are talking about Genene Jones, a pediatric nurse, a woman who craved the drama of a dying child more than anything else in the world, and one of the most disturbing and overlooked cases in American medical history. Stay with us, because this one is going to stay with you. To understand what Genene Jones did, you first have to understand who she was, because she was not a monster the way we usually picture monsters. She was not cold. She was not distant. She was not the quiet one in the corner that nobody ever noticed. Genene Jones was warm. She was loud. She was the kind of person who filled a room the moment she walked in. Born in San Antonio, Texas in 1950, Genene grew up adopted. The family that raised her was loving by most accounts. But she struggled. With identity, with restlessness, with finding her place. School didn't hold her, but people did. Genene was drawn to people. More specifically, and this matters, she was drawn to people who needed her. She married young, had children, divorced, and somewhere in her 20s, she decided she wanted to become a nurse, a pediatric nurse. She wanted to work with the sickest, most vulnerable patients there were. She wanted to work with babies. And here is where it gets complicated. Because Genene Jones was, by all accounts, genuinely good at her job. She was passionate. She remembered her patients' names, their diagnoses, their families. She would stay late. She would cry when a child died. Her coworkers noticed. Her supervisors noticed. Parents noticed. But something else was true at the same time. Genene Jones did not just handle emergencies well. She loved them. She thrived in crisis. The moment a baby's heart monitor started screaming, that is when Genene came alive. At the time, nobody found that strange. You want a nurse who does not panic. You want someone who runs toward the alarm, not away from it. But there is a difference between running toward an emergency and creating one. And that difference, that quiet, terrifying difference, is exactly what the staff at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio were about to discover. Bexar County Hospital, San Antonio, Texas. 1981. Genene Jones was working in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, the PICU. These are the sickest kids in the building, the ones fighting the hardest. The babies who needed round-the-clock care, round-the-clock monitoring. Genene was one of their most dedicated nurses. She requested the hardest cases. She volunteered for extra shifts. She was always there. She worked the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. And her coworkers started calling it something. They called it the death shift. Because something was happening that nobody could explain. Babies were dying. Not babies who were supposed to die. Not children who came in with terminal diagnoses. Children who had come in for manageable things, respiratory infections, gastrointestinal surgery, smoke inhalation. Children who were stable. Children who were getting better. And then, without any warning, they weren't. They would have seizures out of nowhere. Their hearts would stop. Their blood would stop clotting, just inexplicably, for no medical reason anyone could find. And almost every single time it happened on the evening shift. On Genene's shift, a registered nurse named Susanna Maldonado was the one brave enough to say it out loud. She had been going through the hospital's census book, the record of every patient, every shift, every outcome. She sat with the numbers. She ran the math. And then she walked into her supervisor's office and said, "Too many babies are dying." And every single time, the same nurse is in the room. Genene Jones. Her supervisor dismissed it, called it gossip, said accusations like that were not to be made lightly. But Maldonado was not gossiping. She was reading a pattern, and the pattern was undeniable. In the 10 cases investigators would later examine, 10 children who had died in unexplained emergencies. Genene Jones was present at the bedside for what the hospital report carefully called the final events. 10 for 10. The hospital opened an internal investigation, quietly, because they were terrified of lawsuits, terrified of what it would mean if this was real. And while they investigated quietly, in closed-door meetings and carefully worded memos, children kept dying. Before we go any further, there is something you need to understand, because this case does not fully make sense unless you understand what was driving it. What Genene Jones appears to have been doing has a clinical name: Munchausen syndrome by proxy, or in more modern terms, factitious disorder imposed on another. Here's what that means in plain language. There are people, rare, but they exist, who are so deeply addicted to the feeling of being needed, to the praise and attention that comes from being the hero in a crisis, that they will manufacture the crisis themselves just to experience the rescue, not because they hate the person they are hurting. Sometimes, and this is the part that will twist your stomach, because in their own broken way, they love them. They need to be the one who saves them. They crave it. And if there is nothing to save them from, they create something. In Genene's case, investigators believe she was injecting children with drugs, a muscle relaxant called succinylcholine, a blood thinner called heparin, enough to send a tiny, vulnerable body into crisis. And then she would try to save them. She would be the one screaming for the crash cart. She would be the one doing chest compressions, counting out loud, refusing to stop. She would be the one weeping when the child did not make it. And here is what we need you to sit with. She loved those babies. Every person who watched Genene Jones work will tell you that. She was devoted to those children. She knew their names before she even opened their charts. She loved them. And she was killing them. Because the love was never really about them. It was about the moment after the crisis. The moment when the doctor looked at her with relief. When a parent grabbed her hands with tears running down their face. When someone in that room said, "We don't know what we would have done without you." That feeling. That was what she was after. And she would do anything to keep experiencing it. We want to tell you about Chelsea McClellan. Chelsea was 15 months old. A little girl from Kerrville, Texas. A small town about an hour outside San Antonio. Brown eyes. A face her mother could not stop kissing. Her mother's name was Petty. And Petty McClellan loved her daughter with the kind of love that does not have a ceiling. By 1982, Genene Jones had left Bexar County Hospital. The internal investigation had quietly closed without a single formal charge. The hospital, too afraid of what a public accusation would cost them, had simply restructured the unit, eliminating her position so she would have to resign. No official report. No warning to anyone outside those walls. Nothing that followed her out the door. She went and got a new job. A small pediatric clinic in Kerrville, owned by a young doctor named Kathleen Holland, who had heard vague rumors from San Antonio, but had seen nothing official, nothing documented, nothing that could stop her from hiring the most enthusiastic pediatric nurse she had ever interviewed. In September of 1982, Petty McClellan brought baby Chelsea in for a routine visit. A small health concern, nothing frightening. She was not worried. She remembers holding Chelsea in her arms when Genene Jones came over to give her a shot. I was holding Chelsea. She was facing me. Jones gave her the first shot in her left thigh. Immediately, Chelsea had trouble breathing. Chelsea was trying to say my name, but she couldn't. Chelsea McClellan was rushed to the hospital. She never recovered. Chelsea McClellan died at 15 months old. Petty was holding her daughter when it happened. She was right there, inches away, and she had no way to know. No reason in the world to distrust the woman in the scrub standing in front of her. She trusted her. That is the part of this story that we cannot shake. Every parent in that waiting room, in that exam room, in that PICU, they all did everything right. They brought their children to the people who were supposed to protect them. They trusted the system. And the system handed their babies to Genene Jones. After Chelsea died, something finally started to move. Doctors at the hospital where Chelsea had been transferred began asking questions about the clinic, about the nurse. One doctor made a single phone call to San Antonio, described what he was seeing, and the person on the other end of the line went very quiet. Then they said 4 words. "You have a baby killer on your hands." Investigators moved in, and what they found was staggering. A bottle of succinylcholine at the Kerrville clinic had been punctured over and over. Someone had been drawing from it with a syringe. A third bottle had been ordered without the doctor's knowledge. Back at Bexar County Hospital, investigators reviewed years of records. The rate of cardiac arrests and unexplained emergencies on Genene's shift was unlike anything in the hospital's history. The pattern was so consistent, so mathematically undeniable, that there was no scientific explanation that excluded her. Prosecutors estimated she may have killed between 11 and 46 children during her time at that hospital alone. Some investigators believed the number was higher. One prosecutor said 60 babies. And yet, because the hospital had destroyed records, because years of quiet cover-up had buried the evidence, prosecutors could only build airtight cases around a handful of deaths. In 1984, Genene Jones stood trial. She was convicted of the murder of Chelsea McClellan and the attempted murder of another child. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison, and Petty McClellan sat in that courtroom thinking, finally. It is finally over. But it wasn't. In the 1970s, Texas had passed a law designed to ease prison overcrowding. It was called mandatory supervision, and what it meant in plain terms was that prisoners who earned good behavior credits could be released early, sometimes far earlier than anyone imagined when they were sentenced. Genene Jones had been a model inmate. In 2013, Petty McClellan was in Austin meeting with state senators when a congressman pulled her aside and quietly asked her when Genene Jones had been sentenced. Petty told him he left. He came back a few minutes later looking shaken. He said, "We have a problem." Genene Jones was scheduled for mandatory release in March of 2018. "I was stunned," Petty said, sad, and so angry. The woman who had killed her baby girl, while Petty was holding her, was going to walk out of prison. Petty McClellan refused to let that happen. She spent years working with prosecutors, testifying before grand juries, driving to San Antonio for every hearing, making sure nobody in that system forgot what Genene Jones had done. In 2017, Bexar County prosecutors filed 5 new murder charges, covering children who had died on Genene's shift in 1981 and 1982. Children whose cases had never been prosecuted. Children the system had quietly let be forgotten. Jones pleaded not guilty. But in January 2020, just weeks before trial, faced with 200 potential witnesses and nearly 100 separate criminal acts prosecutors were prepared to present, Genene Jones changed her mind. She pleaded guilty to the murder of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer, who had died on December 12, 1981. She was sentenced to life in prison. She will not be eligible for parole until she is nearly 90 years old. Petty McClellan fought for over 30 years. Through grief, through rage, through a legal system that seemed, at times, designed to protect everyone except the people who had lost the most. She fought long enough to see Genene Jones finally say the words. And then, in June of 2019, 6 months before that guilty plea, Petty McClellan died. She was 64 years old. She never got to hear it. Juanita Villarreal, the mother of 3-month-old Paul, one of the 5 children Jones was charged with murdering, died just 6 months after Petty. She never heard the words either. 2 mothers. Decades of fighting. Both gone before the woman who took their children could bring herself to admit what she did. That is not justice. There is no word for what that is. Genene Jones never explained herself. She maintained her innocence for nearly 40 years, until the weight of the evidence made that impossible. And even then, she admitted to only one murder, one out of dozens. She never gave those families what they were owed, but we say their names here: Chelsea, Joshua, Rosemary, Paul, and the ones whose cases were buried with the records the hospital destroyed. They came into a hospital and never went home. Their families deserved better than a system that cared more about protecting its own reputation than finding the truth. They didn't get that, but we don't forget them. Before we let you go, if this story hit you the way it hit us, drop a comment right now and tell us which part got you. We read every single comment on this channel. We want to know what landed, what questions you have, and who you think we should cover next. This channel exists because these stories deserve to be told. Black women, whether they are victims, survivors, or the ones who did the unthinkable, deserve the same attention the rest of the true crime world gives to everyone else, and we are just getting started. If you are new here, welcome. Hit subscribe right now because we post new cases every week, and you do not want to miss what is coming. We have stories lined up that will make this one feel like a warm-up. For those of you who have been here from the beginning, you already know what to do. Share this video, put it on your story, send it to that one friend who watches true crime at 2 a.m. and thinks nobody else understands them. The stories we cover here do not make the front page. The only way they spread is through people like you deciding that these names are worth remembering. Chelsea deserved better. Joshua deserved better. They all did. The least we can do is make sure nobody forgets. This has been Black Women of Crime. We will see you in the next one.